But the difference was that he asked me very, very specific questions that nobody had ever asked me before. They were so specific, I was like, are you reading my mind? Yes, that happened. So one of the things that I've noticed is that for business owners who have these problems in their business, that it seems like they're always chasing these problems, right? And when I think about solving problems, I've noticed this over the years of consulting with different businesses, that everybody kind of does the same thing. So they come to me and they're like, hey, we've got this problem in our business, and they don't say what the problem is. What they tend to do is they tend to kind of tell like a story, and the story gives some context about like when the problem happens or the information around when the problem happens. And they actually are not articulating what the problem is. They know that there are some negative consequences that come, or some frustration that comes, but they're not actually articulating what the specific problem is. And it makes me think of an experience, and this was actually a very impactful experience for me about solving problems and about consulting. When I was younger, my late teens, early 20s, I would frequently get very sick. I would get sick, end up in, get a stomach issue, end up in the hospital. And from the time I was like 17, 18 years old until the time I was in my mid 20s, I would basically end up in the hospital a few times every year. And I would talk to the doctors and I would tell them what was going on, and I would give them a detailed story about this issue. And on several instances, I'm in the emergency room and I would give the story, and it would be, misdiagnosed. And I'm telling the same thing to all of these doctors, and each doctor who is a generalist would have their own diagnosis, right? One thought it was an ulcer, one thought it was cancer, one thought it was, I don't remember all of them, but there was a lot of them, right? And so finally, after years of this, I just thought I was dying. I just thought there was no more hope. I thought I was dying. And finally, after years of this, one of the doctors that I saw, I let him know how frequently that this was happening. And he said, you need to just go see a specialist. He said, we can't diagnose this. We don't know what it is. You need to see a specialist. And when I saw the specialist, I noticed two things. And this taught me an incredible lesson about a specialist versus a generalist, and consulting in business, and the difference between, somebody who has a medical degree and an expert in solving a certain problem. The first thing was that when I saw him, I told him the same story that I told everybody else. But the difference was that he asked me very, very specific questions that nobody had ever asked me before. And they were so specific, I was like, are you reading my mind? Yes, that happens, right? So I remember he asked, he's like, when you're getting sick, when this happens, does light bother it? And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, And he proceeded to ask me a few additional questions about my specific case, about my specific problem. And I remember thinking, like, every single question was so detailed and so specific. I thought he was reading my mind, and I didn't even realize it. And after years of suffering, after years of dealing with this problem, he said, I think that you have this thing. And he explained it to me, and it was something I had never heard of. I even made a joke to him. I said, that sounds made up. and he kind of chuckled it, but he said, we're going to run a couple tests to eliminate a few other things, but if it's not those two things, then this is what it is. And the amount of relief that I experienced at that time was unlike anything that I've ever experienced before. It was surreal to me. And when I look back on that, I've reflected on that frequently when it comes to business, when I've tried to help business owners solve problems in their business, right? They come to me and they're telling me the story, and they're telling me about the different times that they experience this and how frustrating it is. And then when I ask the right questions, the detailed questions that gets into it, that's when the aha moments start happening. And so why is that? Well, I'm probably going to botch this, but I think it was Albert Einstein that said if he had 1 hour to solve a problem, that he would spend 55 minutes defining the problem and 5 minutes solving it. And that's the thing, is what most of us do is we tell stories and we can never get past the story. And when it comes to solving problems, what we need to do is we need to clearly articulate, to clearly identify the problem. We need to spend most of the time of problem solving figuring out what the problem is. And we need to spend more of our time figuring out how to clearly articulate, how to clearly define the problem. Because once we have that down, once we know what the problem is, and we have it clearly defined, it's typically very quick to solve. Like for my illustration with my experience with my doctor, the solution, I thought I was dying, right? But the solution ended up being very simple. And once we knew what the problem was, it didn't take him very long to solve it. And so that's the thing, is one lesson we can learn from this is that if we're having, a problem that needs to be solved, we need to take the time to articulate it and to get it down. And one thing that you can do to help you do that is ask a question. We identify the problem to the best of our ability. And then we start asking, who is the right person to help me solve this? See, I had never asked, who is the right person to help me solve this problem? I just thought a doctor is a doctor, and any doctor should be able to help me if I can be helped. But that wasn't the case. It was an expert. It was a specialist. And so if I would have more quickly understood how important it is to ask, who is the person that should be helping me, then I would have had my problem solved in a matter of a few minutes, like when I did finally do that. So the first lesson is articulate the problem as clearly as you can. And then once you've done that, the second lesson is find out who is the best person to help you solve that. And then consult with those individuals, because when we know the problem, the who can help us to define it further. And what we thought may have been something very difficult to solve may actually end up being very simple. And there's a lot of examples like that, right? I just this past week showed somebody something that they thought was going to be an impossible goal. It was a pipe dream for them, right? It was something that if they did this one thing, they felt that it would solve everything else in their business related to getting customers. And it had to do with like getting, building up their YouTube channel and building up video views. And within a very short period of time, I told them exactly how they could do it. And then we implemented it together. And within just a few short days, that what was once a pipe dream, something that they thought, was going to take years, they now saw that it didn't have to take years. It could be months, maybe a year at the most. And so that's the thing, is we don't know what we don't know. We don't know everything. And it's important that when we're solving a problem, that we find the right people to help us solve it. And we get it clearly defined so that we can, quickly have it solved and take most of the time defining that. So when it comes to solving problems in your business, hopefully that helps and gives you a framework that you can work on to more quickly solve problems and to grow and scale your business faster. Hope this was helpful.